Hey everybody, we're back. This is Ray. We have our 305 dummy block here, which is our setup block that we use. Now this came out of a pickup in the mid 80s. Later, I think it was about right around in 86. So it's got the older heads on it, which we need for this intake. It's not the fuel injected heads. So and it is the 305 truck head, which is a 58cc chamber, or they should be anyway. We're going to find out here in a few minutes when we pull everything apart, and if they are the 58cc chamber head, then we will probably use these on our build. Not many people know that the 305, not the 350, the 305 Chevy small block pickup head is a 58cc chamber. So if you're looking to boost a little compression and a little more performance out of your motor, that is an option. You can't just bolt them on though, because of them being a pickup head, the intake runners are smaller than the car heads, and the valves are also smaller. So what we will be doing, if these are the heads and they look good and we're going to use them, what we will be doing is putting in the bigger valves like the car would have in them, and we will be hogging out the intake runners, and we'll also be hogging out the exhaust runners to get more flow coming out of the heads also. So they're a poor man's high performance head, kind of sorta. If you're building on a budget, it's not a bad idea to look into it. We stumbled onto this years ago when we were racing cars, and obviously we're racing on a budget, and we had claimers and this and that, so we had to make as much horsepower as we possibly could out of basically junkyard junk. And this was one of the ways that we could produce some horsepower, was to use these 305 heads, and people have been throwing them away for years thinking that they're garbage, and they actually have some potential, but it takes work too. You can't just bolt them on there, and we're going to show you how to do that. If these heads check out good, then they're not cracked, and they are actually the 58cc chamber head like I think they are. We will go through that in a video, and we'll show you just how to make all this happen and create some more horsepower out of them. We will also be showing you how to gasket match to the intake and whatnot as well. So every little bit helps when you're building horsepower, especially if you're building on a budget. And you know, you're not gonna kick out no 700-800 horse out of this motor anyway, but it'll be a little more spunkier than what a typical 305 would be. So we'll get into that later. Today what we're going to do is take the top part of this motor off. I actually have another block, short block, that has like 46,000 miles out of it. It was pulled out of a Monte Carlo SS. It is a 305. I believe the block is actually an HO block, so which makes it a little bit better. And if it's not, it don't really matter, because we're going to be doing the same thing regardless what it is. We got the motor. It's very low mileage. It ran really well. The guy that had the Monte Carlo wanted a big block put into it because he wanted a street strip kind of car, and that little 305 just wasn't going to get it for him. So he had a machine shop yank the motor out, build a motor for him. He had the motor sitting there, and we ended up buying it from him. So that's basically where we're at with this build. It's going to be more than enough motor for this rat rod. This rat rod isn't going to weigh hardly anything, so it's going to be more than enough engine. And with the heads that we're going to work on a little bit, it'll just make it a little bit more. It'll give it a little more power. So okay, let's dive into this. We're going to start out by taking the air filter and the carburetor off. And a lot of these are not very tight because it was just kind of put together as a mock-up anyway. As you can see, some of these bolts aren't very tight at all, so it should come apart pretty easy. The same machine shop that built the motor for the fella, well, that's actually where the motor was still sitting when I bought it from him, had this intake. And it's a intake that had been taken off of a roundy-round dirt race car. They have all kinds of these take-off parts and pieces and stuff, and I got it for a super low price. So if you're looking for these kind of parts and pieces, that's an avenue. You know, a lot of your machine shops, if they get an engine in and the fellow wants to put a different set of heads or a different intake or different carburetor or anything like that on it, it's a possibility that the owner of the parts would sell them. And they're used parts, so you can get pretty good prices on these parts, and there shouldn't be anything wrong with them. I mean, obviously do a inspection. I'll make sure they're not cracked or don't have any busted off studs and stuff in them, but this one here looked really good. It already had some of the plugs already put into it to stop the water jacket antifreeze from going to side, because a lot of these aftermarket intakes have a lot of access holes and stuff that need plugs in them. So, you know, every time you get one of them plugs, that's a couple dollars. Well, you take this particular intake, there's a plug here, there's one there, one there, one there, one there. That's 5 plugs. You know, even if they're $1 or $2 a piece, whatever, you know, it's a savings because it already has some of them in it. Obviously, one of these we're going to be using for a temperature gauge. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to use one for the temperature gauge itself, and I think we're going to put a heat temperature sensor in the other one to turn our electric fan on and off for the radiator. So even though we have these 2 ports here, we still might end up actually using these 2 ports instead of plugging them off. We'll see in the future. So, all right. Oh, still got one more right there. And again, this intake was just basically set on here for mock-up purposes, so that's why you're seeing there's only 3 bolts in it holding it in place. Alright, so there's that big single plane intake. As you can see, it's a monster. It's big. So that's what we were looking for. We wanted something that would look really nice on there, something that would stand out differently and catch some attention, and he gave us a super good price. I think I paid like $50 for it. So where are you going to find a high-rise single plenum intake like that for $50? I mean, that's one of those deals that you would take any time of day. It's just a good deal. I mean, they weren't seeing where they were going to use it anymore. They were headed in a different direction with their race car. I don't know what they were doing with it. I don't know if they were going with dual quads or fuel injection. I really don't know. But whatever it was they were doing, it was different than what that intake allowed. So, all right, so I'm just gonna pop off these valve covers here. Looks like we have some rust in our runners of our intake here, but that's not really that big a deal, because like I said, we're going to be hogging them all out and we're going to be putting all new valves in anyway. So as long as they're not cracked, and as long as we can have enough meat in them to cut new seats in them and stuff, we're going to be probably using these heads, because they do have the markings. I don't know if you can see this on the camera or not, but it's like a real sharp little triangle there with just a little square part attached to it on the side, and that is normally the pickup 305 58cc chambered head. Normally has that imprint on the casting. So, and again, depending on what you're doing, you can get aftermarket aluminum heads, which dissipate heat well. They're lightweight on the front of the vehicle. You can get those for $400 or $500 a piece, and they do perform very well. So if you're looking for high horsepower, you're not going to be probably putting a 305 together anyway, but we have put these 305 heads on 350 engines that have been run in round dirt cars. We've actually put them on some 400 small block Chevys in the past, and they work well as long as you're willing to take the time and spend to hog them out with die grinders and whatnot, and smooth the ports out, make them bigger, and it takes a lot of time. It does. It takes a lot of time. But if you're putting it together for yourself and you kind of like that kind of stuff, that's great, because you're saving yourself a little bit of money. You're learning as you go, and you got something you're proud of when you're done, because you did that. So let's see if we can pop this valve cover off here. There we go. Alright. Now, one thing that we did learn, and again, being a 305, you're not going to be putting a lot of horsepower to it probably anyway, but one thing that we did learn is camshafts. If you put a big camshaft in, these pressed in studs will eventually fail. They will work their way up. So what I would recommend is that you have your local machine shop take and cut the bosses down and thread them, tap them for the screw-in studs, and go ahead and spend a little bit extra if your budget can afford it, and put the guide plates in too, because that helps with the push rods. As you can see, it looks like Fluffy has made a home in our engine block, but it doesn't matter, because again, this engine block is garbage. I think it's locked up even. I think it's frozen. So we're going to go ahead and loosen up our rocker arms, and we might as well just take the rocker arms right off actually, and we'll pull all of our push rods out, and because we're going to eventually be taking the valves and stuff out anyway. So we'll go ahead and what do we got here? The right socket should be 5/8. There we go. And you can take your engines apart with power if you want to. I normally don't use power tools when it's assembly or disassembly, because if I use my wrenches and sockets and stuff, I can normally feel and touch and see if things are not quite the way they should be, a little easier. I don't know, it's up to you. A lot of people use power tools to take them apart with, but if you do, make sure you check out your parts real well, because it's easy to miss something. So So basically what we're going to be doing is taking this top end off and going through it and putting it on a different engine. So look at all that grunge. It's grungy, but it's not real bad. I mean, it's typical, but they should clean up real well. It's dried on there more so than being just built up gunk, so they should clean off pretty good. Get this pivot out of there. There we go. And being that we're gonna go through all this and new valves and whatnot, we'll check our springs over. We may have to put another set of springs on it, we don't know. But we're gonna probably send the heads to a machine shop, have them baked, cleaned up real well, shot tumbled to get the heads nice and clean, and then they'll magnaflux them and make sure that there's no cracks in them. If they're cracked, then we'll source out another set of heads, hopefully be able to find another set just like them, because I do really want to show you how to go through these and make a nice little set of heads out of them, where most machine shops and most people would just throw them away and get another set of heads, which, and if that's what you want to do, that's fine, but you don't have to. There is potential in them. So I mean, I've used aftermarket heads myself on some of our motors. I've used stock heads. I've used rebuilt heads. We've used a lot of different heads over the years. And I just kind of like this little trick that we do with these. And it's something that a lot of people don't know about. And it's just kind of fun to share the information and show how to do it. And if you are working on a budget, it is an alternative to buying heads, and hopefully you got a few tools where you can work on them and whatnot, and it's just fun. I enjoy doing it. So, but if we were putting together some good horsepower, street horsepower that we want to do a little drag racing maybe on the weekends and a little bit of cruising and stuff like that, and I wanted good solid horsepower, nah, I probably wouldn't necessarily use them. I would probably think a little more about an aluminum head, just because a lighter race car is a faster race car, and if you can shed 20-30 pounds, that's quite a bit of weight to shed off of a vehicle. So aluminum water pump, aluminum radiators, aluminum heads, aluminum intakes, that all adds up in the end, and it adds up quick. That's a lot of weight savings when you look at an overall car or street rod or whichever. And let's face it, aluminum looks cool too. Alright, let's see here. This one here is just a little bit stuck. There we go. Okay, I'm looking at the tops of our valves here, and boy, everything looks really decent. It's nice and flat. There's no deep valleys or nothing more in them. We might be able to reuse our exhaust valves. We don't know. I know in the past, again, if you use a aftermarket cam that's got a fairly decent lift, that reusing your stock valves is not always a good idea, because they're actually two-pieced. Just under the the flare of the valve or the head of the valve where the stem comes down to it, they're actually fused together. And they do pop apart. So the more pressure you put on them, the heavier the spring, the bigger the cam, the more pressure you put on them, they can fail. They can pop apart, which sends the top of your valve down in your cylinder on top of your piston, and it's not a good outcome. It makes a mess. So I do recommend going to an aftermarket stainless valve. It's a good idea. They last longer. They don't come apart because they're one piece. So I do recommend that. Look at the sealant on that bolt. It looks like it was just put in just recently. Unbelievable. Another one looked really nice. So I really don't know what happened to this engine. I don't know if it got yanked out and it got stuck from sitting, or it's blown. I really don't know. At this point in time, I'm not seeing anything that's out of the ordinary with it. I mean, it looks fairly decent, but I think it is locked up, and it could be locked up just from rust in the cylinders. Not sure. I guess we'll find that out when we pull these heads off, see what the cylinders look like. When we bring our other engine in that we're actually going to use, we're going to be pulling that one apart to a point. We're going to check out the crank and the bearings and the main and rod bearings, the cam and all that. We're going to check all that out. We're thinking about changing the cam. I have a, yeah, it's not a great big cam, but it should be a good cam for that little 305. It's one of the larger cams that you would use without having to change the torque converter. So we can use a stock torque converter with it. You don't have to get a bigger stall converter or anything like that for it. So we're thinking about, I think it's called a 292 cam or something like that, a 102 cam, something like that. I think the number is a 102, and I think it's called a 292 or something like that. I'll have to dig it out and we'll look at the numbers on it and I'll see what it is there. But I know it's one of the larger cams that you can run without having to change the torque converter. I do remember that part of it, but we've had the cam for a while. It's in the box. We got new lifters and whatnot for it as well. So yeah, we're thinking about putting it on this project. It should be a nice little cam. Won't be nothing super aggressive, but it should give it a nice little lopey sound and should give it a little bit of performance as well. See if we can get this head broke loose. Let's see, here we go. Oh, I still got a bolt in it. Go figure. I guess that's what happens when you start talking and not paying attention to what you're doing. Of course, I think I have that problem quite often. Let's see here. Alright, now let's try that. See if we can pop that up out of there. Oh, much better. Much better. We might even get it this time. Yeah. Make room here on the bench for it. And come on. There we go. Oh, look at the moisture in there. Yeah. Well, I can see that's probably why our engine is stuck. It probably got pulled out and set off to the side, and because it was sitting outside possibly, it looks like it just collected some moisture, and it looks like the pistons are probably stuck in the bores because of the rust above them. This steel gasket here that I'm looking at tells me that that's a GM gasket. That's not an aftermarket gasket. So chances are that this motor has never been taken apart, at least to this point anyway. And yeah, look at all that nasty. Yep. So, but it's not the end of the world, because these heads will clean up, trust me. They may look a little grungy right now, but if you can see what I'm doing here, all that rust just comes right off, because it's just in this port area. It's not on the machine area, so it should clean up real nice. The valves, we can go to just a little bit bigger valve maybe. I don't know it. Yeah, it ain't gonna be very much of a bigger valve because we're almost to the side right here. But if you look at this area right here where the spark plug is, okay, as you see right here where this spark plug is, this meat right here and how filled in this area is, and then see where the exhaust, and it's got this little deal here. These are closed in pretty good. If this was a typical set of like 350 heads, just a run-of-the-mill head, this would all be opened up. This here would all be angled back in here. This area here would be bigger over to here. This area here would all be bigger. And because of that, it makes it like a 72cc chamber, where these ones here being all closed in are like a 58cc chamber. So as long as these heads aren't cracked, we should be able to go ahead and use them. And when our machine shop, our local machine shop, goes through them, they'll tell us whether they're good or not. Normally, if they crack, it'll be like between the valves right in here, or sometimes it'll be across, like right in here. And what causes that? Overheating causes it. Just normally it'll be like overheating that'll cause that, because these heads are not real thick. They're not real heavy duty like the early Chevy heads were. You can see how this here is cut out like this. The older heads, the heavy duty heads they call them, this would have been right straight across, and then this would have been up here and like this. So you have all this cut out of them, so that makes them what they call a light duty head. But they're still good heads to use as long as they're not cracked. So alright, well there's that one. We're going to go ahead and push it over here off to the side. And if you can also see, what I'll do is I'll do this too. The intake runner is right here. And what we're going to end up doing eventually is we're going to be cutting these up through here, and then down through here, and then down through here. And we're going to be taking this and rounding this shoulder back, and making these runners larger, and we're going to smooth them out. Not glassy smooth, but we're going to smooth them out a little bit and actually cut them bigger. So that's to come, and it'll be just these two and these two, and then the same on the other head. We're not going to do anything with this one and this one, because that's our water jacket. That's where our antifreeze goes through. So, and we'll clean up this area here as well, get that taken care of in there, because that's for the EGR. But not that we're going to be running EGR, but it's good to clean them out. Something else we're going to be doing is we're going to be cutting our exhausts probably down into here, and then over into here, and then up into here, and then across. We're going to open these up larger too, and then we're going to work that in and make these bigger. Where these areas here come through around the valve guide, we're going to make them smaller, so the exhaust gases will flow out of those better. And same thing up here, we're going to cut these down. But what we're going to do with that is we're going to use our gasket to mark these with. And then we'll go from there. So I'll show you how we do all that in the future. So, but that's what the plan is with these heads. As long as they turn out good. If not, we'll see if we can locate another set like them that we can use. So, all right, let's get ready to pull our other side apart. Start off by pulling the valve cover off. When we get done with this engine, we're just going to set it outside, because our mock-up that we needed it for, we're done with, and we're not going to need it for a while. So, and because it is pretty much a throwaway block, all we use it for is mocking up. So eventually we'll probably be pulling the crank and rods and stuff out of it, so we can lighten it up, so it's a little bit easier to handle when we do use it for mock-up. But okay, well, I'm not going to bore you with doing this other side. It's the same as what our first side was. we are going to pull the motor mounts off before we're done, but I think we're going to call that a wrap, and we'll be done with this. We will be back in another session. At that point in time, we'll have our other block in here, so that'll be coming up here in just a few seconds. So we'll see you in a few. Thanks. Okay, we're back. This is the good 305 engine that we're going to use. This is the one that's out of the Monte Carlo SS. The heads have already been taken off it. Intake's already been taken off it. They've been off for a while. It was covered up and it was put into our back storage. And it took us a bit to get it out of there, being that we have a lot of snow and whatnot around. So, but we were able to dig it out, and we got it on our engine stand. We got our other mock-up engine off the stand, and it's outside. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to pull our lifters out of here, and we're going to pull our harmonic balancer off and our front cover and oil pan off, and get into the inside of it. So I guess we'll start first of all by pulling our lifters out, and there are a lot of different ways you can do this. If they're not stuck really hard, a lot of times we can just take a little hook like this and just hook that little edge of the retainer, and we can pull them right up out of there. And these lifters look they look brand new, other than having a little bit of discoloring on them. The bottoms are nice and flat, and yeah, they look good. We're not going to reuse these anyway. We're going to put brand new lifters in when we change out our cam, but we're just looking at wear on the engine. The car that this came out of had like 46,000 miles on it, so we're hoping that those were just normal run miles, not hard abuse miles. The engine was not blown by any means. The fellow that owned the car wanted to go to a big block, so the little 305 that came in it was not what he was looking for. He was looking for more of a street strip car, one that he can play with on the weekends at his local drag strip, and one that he could also drive back and forth to work if he wanted to. But he was looking at putting some sort of a big block configuration in. So, and we were lucky enough to be able to buy the motor from him after they pulled it out of the car. So here we go. We've had the motor for, oh, I don't know, a couple years probably, and it's just been sitting in storage. So we did drain the oil out of it already, so we can flip it over upside down here in a little bit. Okay, that's all of our lifters. Again, we're not going to reuse these, so we're not in no desperate need of making sure they go back in the same hole or nothing like that, because they're going to end up just getting thrown away. We're not going to use them. So go ahead and pull our dipstick tube out of here. Wrong size wrench. It's got a little bolt that holds it here. Work that up out of there. There we go. Okay, now we're going to pull the harmonic balancer off the front of it. And to do that, I have a set of tools here. This is a master set. You by no means need a master set of these. This is the important part right here. This and let's see, this part. We got this little guy that goes in here. And he's going to be probably way too long. Use these. You just got to figure out what's our thread size here. Looks like that one right there. A lot of times you can rent these tools from your local auto parts store for just a little bit of nothing. They're not that expensive to buy. Maybe a buddy of yours might even have one. They're pretty popular. All right. Let's see if we can get this to come off. Oh yeah, it's already coming off. Okay, there we go. Just set that for now. Okay. Now we'll go ahead and we'll take our bolts out around here. It probably won't pop out right away because there's a lip up inside there, but we'll go ahead and take our bolts out. Get them loosened up here. Again, there's not a whole lot of torque on these, so make sure when you go to put this back together that you don't over tighten them, because that's how you get gaskets leaking right away. Is most of these little pans like this, the gaskets get over tightened, so there we go. Now this is a 305, so we have to make sure we put the 305 parts back on it. The timing cover, we have to utilize the 305. The harmonic balancer, we have to use the 305. The flex plate on the back, or the ring gear, whichever you want to call it, for the starter, and then the torque converter also bolts to it. We have to make sure we use our 305, everything that came with these motors. We have to keep it on here. The 350, 327, 400 parts and whatnot are interchangeable to a point, but it's just much easier if you keep the 305 stuff with the 305, because if you put a 305 together and put a 350 harmonic balancer on it, it's not going to have a good outcome, because they are two different crankshafts, and the harmonic balancers are different. So yeah, that's stuck on there pretty good, so we'll just leave that on there. We'll go ahead and pull this apart right here, get that cover off of there. That's what drives the fuel pump. Just got a paper towel in there. Pop that loose. There we go. And then we'll pull this little shaft out of there too, and that's the shaft that works off of the cam lobe, and then there's a little finger that comes up here off the fuel pump, and the cam lobe makes that fuel pump work off of here. So, and we're gonna be using this, so we're gonna keep it. Okay, I believe we can go ahead and pull our pin back here, and we can roll our engine over. Hopefully we won't make too big a mess on the floor. I think we have all the fluids drained out of it for the most part. Make it a little dribbling. But we should be in good shape. Looks like you're right. Our bottom of our pan is a little messed up. Probably did that when it came back from North Dakota. We'll probably have to take a hammer and thunk that back out a little bit, get that dent out of there, and maybe some of this out. We don't want that to hit our crankshaft or get to the point where we can't make a seal with the drain bolts. So, alright, let's go ahead and pop the rest of these little bolts out. Okay, we'll take this rail off. There. And we'll start on this side. This one here, bringing the stud and all up, which is no big deal, that's fine. Just, we'll put it in, take it out the same way. If we have to take the other one out for any reason, there's a socket that sits on those. It's a star socket, or a Torx type of socket. It has a female star in it instead of a male star like you would have on other things, but they're made to come out, so we can take it out if we need to. Compressor, just keep that, shut that off. You don't need that going. Later, and everything inside looks pretty clean. We're looking good. So okay, we're going to pull the pan gasket off here. Stud, there we go. Alright. Yeah, everything looks pretty good. Looks like our This got a lot of oil in it. It's dripping out. We can take that off. Catch some of that so it don't make quite as big a mess on the floor. We're going to be putting in a different oil pump too, so we're not gonna fiddle with this. Y'all can rebuild your motors and whatnot any way you really want to. Me personally, I don't pull a motor apart unless I change out the timing chain and gears. I always put new timing chain and gears in, always put new gaskets in, new seals, I always put a new oil pump on. It's just, kind of learned that the hard way years ago. You're right here, they're cheap, they're not that expensive, and I just change them out and put a new one in it while I'm right here. I don't necessarily buy the high pressure oil pumps, but I do like the high volume pumps because they seem to put a lot of oil through and it keeps everything lubricated very, very well. So, alright, well, we'll pop that oil pump off of there. I need we'll save this bolt because we'll need this bolt to put the new pump back on. So we'll save this. There we go. And there's our shaft for the distributor as well. So we'll set this over here out of the way. And we should be able to take our front cover off now. There she comes. Just wiggle it ever so slightly. It's caught on the little dowel pins there. There we go. Alright. And there's a lot of slop on that side. Okay, it don't matter. We're not gonna reuse the original timing chain and gear anyway. This is one of those plastic ones. It's got a plastic coating over these teeth right here, and after years of use they get hot and they end up crumbling apart, and the next thing you know they're laying in the bottom of your oil pan and your engine skips times. So we're not even going to fiddle with these. We're going to put all brand new timing chain and gears. Everything we put in will be steel, none of this plastic stuff here. So alright, we need to Pop those 3 bolts. I believe those are 1/2 inch. Wrench. There we go. We'll save these 3 bolts and reuse these also, but we will not be using the cam or the timing chain and gears, but we will reuse these 3 bolts. And this here should pop off. Yeah, that's junk. That's garbage. We're going to throw this away. And we're going to also throw our cam away, but we need to get that out of there. Let's see if I got a bolt that'll... Alright, there we go. See if we can... There we go. Get that to turn ever so slightly. Just to help us work it out. Here we go. I want to be careful on our cam bearings. You can reuse cam bearings over and over and over and over as long as they don't get all scuffed up putting cams in and out. And if you're really careful and you don't scuff them up, we can reuse our cam bearings. So that's our goal here. There we go. Okay, and I just put a simple bolt in it for a handle, and this cam is probably fine. It's probably just fine. The motor ran good. It's just a matter of it was not enough motor for him. But we're going to put a new cam in it anyway. We're going to bump up our horsepower a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit more. So that's garbage. We'll eventually pull this sprocket here off also, and do away with it when we put our new one on, but I'm going to leave it on there for the time being. Our cam bearings look good. Alright. So, while we're right here, and the camera is right here, I'm going to go ahead and pull this front main bearing out and see what the bearing looks like. See if it's something we can reuse or if we're going to have to replace them. Ooh, and they are tight. There we go. Okay, now what we want to do, we want to look and see if we have any markings on this. And it don't look like it. There's an F there for probably for the front. I'm thinking maybe not. Let's see what this one looks like. Yeah, that one's got an F on it too, and so does that one. It does have an arrow on it, is pointing forward. And those look like they all have an F, so the F must not mean anything. What I'm going to do before I pull all of them off is I'm going to put one little dimple here, and then 2 on this one, 3 on this one, 4 on this one. And the reason I do that is that way this is the front one, this is number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, because those need to go right back in there in the exact same spot. So if we pull this all apart to clean it, we're going to want to remove these, but we want to make sure that we put them back in the same order. So I'm going to go get a little punch right now. And all I'm going to use is just a regular punch, and I'm going to put one little divot right there, just like that. That's all we need, just something we can see. And in here, we're going to use 2. In here, we're going to put 3. And here, we're going to put 4. Just like that. That way we know that they go back in the same spot, and we got this little arrow which points forward, so we know that those are going to be where we need them. So I'll go ahead and pop this one up out of there, and let's get us a clean paper towel here. Alright, and there's a little wear in it, not much, not bad. We could easily run these, no problem, we could easily run that. Not only that, but that tells me that our crank is probably in really, really good shape also. Yeah, crank looks really well, real good. So, but what we're going to do is, before we put it all back together, is we're going to double check with some plastic gauge, make sure that we have ample enough clearance in there that we don't have a ridiculous amount of clearance. I'm pretty sure we're all standard here, and it looks like it. Yep, GM. Yeah, and we're all standard. So this motor don't look like it's been apart at all. So, which is good. We got a motor that we can definitely work with. We would not have to change these bearings. We could put it right back together with these very same bearings and run it. Not a problem. Everything looks good. So I'm gonna, for now, I'm just gonna set this back on there, and we're gonna put this together like this, and I am going to pick one of the easier rod bearings to pull off, just so we can show you what those look like. Maybe that one right there. Looks like it might be one of the easier ones to get to. And again, we would do the very same thing with our rods. We're going to start up here with number 1. We'll put 1 tap with the chisel or the punch in that one, and a 2, and then 3, and then 4. This one will have 5. This one will have 6. And we'll put them right on this little flat surfaced area right here is where we'll end up punching them. We'll go all the way back to number 8. That way they get put right back in the same hole, the same way, and everything will work just like it did before we took it apart. And we know we're not going to get things backwards. stuff in the wrong hole and whatnot, because pretty much everything is in really good shape. We want to keep it that way. We don't want to mess things up. So let's see if I can just pop this loose. Yeah, there we go. Okay, the bearing stayed on the rod, so we'll have to see if we can work that off of there. A lot of times the oil will create a suction on it and they're hard to get off. Let's see if maybe we can use our little pick and grab just the edge. There we go. All right. Again, we'll grab another fresh paper towel and we'll look at this. And okay, our rod bearing does not look as good as our main bearing did. As you can see, it's got a few lines in it and it looks a little darker, which really isn't that big of a deal. It probably could be re-ran, not a problem, but I think we're probably going to just put all new bearings in it and be done with it. This here is probably a standard GM also. See if we can find our letters on it, our numbers. Yeah, right there. It's hard to see. Yeah, looks like GM. So yeah, these are going to be standard as well, it looks like. Yep. Okay, so we'll probably end up ordering a set of standard main bearings and a standard set of rod bearings for it, and put those in it. When we put it all back together, we'll definitely be plastic gauging it before we assemble it, just to make sure that all of our bearing clearances are proper. And again, I'm just going to stick this back on there. Okay. Well, that's pretty much going to bring our video to a close. All we're going to end up doing is popping the rod caps off, pushing the pistons out. No big deal there, one by one. We're going to take our main bearings out also, one by one. We'll pop the crank out of it, so we'll have a bare block. Then we'll clean the block all up and reassemble it in a future video. We're going to have to send out for some parts. We're going to have to send the heads to the machine shop, get them checked out. We might send our block up to the machine shop and get it cleaned, because they can clean it out very, very well. And we'll order main bearing, rod bearings, a complete gasket set, a complete seal set with the gaskets, new timing chaining gears, new oil pump, and we'll go from there. So this is just a basic tear down. Any small block GM motor comes apart the same way. Big blocks come apart the same way too. Big blocks, some of this stuff is going to look a little different. The heads for sure are going to look a little different where the ports are, but the process is pretty much all the same. And when we get all of our machine work done and we get the parts all in, we'll show another video of putting this motor back together. Hopefully at that time, once we get it back together, we can just go ahead and put the transmission to it and set it into our chassis. We're hoping to be to that point with the chassis where we're waiting on an engine here soon. So until we get done or get ready for the next video. We'll see you then. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, hit a notification button. That way when our videos come out, you'll be notified, and you'll be able to watch them without missing any of them. So hang in there. We'll get this motor together pretty soon. We got some time to spare. We're still waiting on brake hoses for the frame, so hopefully they'll be in soon, and that'll actually be the next video of putting those on. So thanks for watching. See ya.